We are experimenting now more with the multimedia presentations and sort of a way for you to learn at your own convenience. So please bear with me, give me some feedback as to how well this is going to go over, and we'll try to make whatever adjustments we can make and accommodate the various learning styles. Today we are going to look at an overview of public sector human resource system. Now, in doing that, we are going to look at not just public sector human resource systems, but all human resource systems. We're going to try to accomplish, in essence, three tasks. And if you look at your lesson plan, you'll see what those three tasks are. They are, first, we're going to try to give you an idea of what a human resource system is, the purpose and why organizations have to have a human resource system, what the goals of a human resource system are. The next task we will do is try to compare, look at the function of a human resource system and the functions, and see how those functions may play out differently depending upon the sector that they're in, whether they are the same in the public sector, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector. And finally, we will take a look at how do you analyze a human resource problem? How do you analyze a human resource policy? What is the analytical framework that you will start from in trying to address any human resource problem and trying to make a determination of where the issue is and how to solve it? So let's get started with the first slide. The mission of the organization is, in short, the purpose of the organization. It tells what an organization was created to do, and that is particularly true, probably more so in the public sector and nonprofit sector and particularly in the nonprofit sector, than even in the private sector. In the private sector, you always have a mission to have a good bottom line, to earn money, to make a living, to make money for stockholders or the owner. In the public sector or the nonprofit sector, the mission is much more important because that mission determines why the organization exists. It gives birth to the organization. The organization, on the other hand, is just a group of people who have formulated themselves or structured themselves in such a way that they are able to function to carry out that mission, to achieve the goals that mission would say that they need to achieve, i.e. the Red Cross is organized in such a way as to provide relief in areas of distress. The Salvation Army is organized in such a way to provide relief in times of stress. The FBI is organized in such a way to protect the security interests of the United States. The mission determines the purpose of the organization and how that organization is going to structure itself in order to accomplish the mission. The organization, again, is just a group of people who structure themselves in such a way to make sure that the mission is accomplished. Organizations are generally broken down into work units. Those work units are smaller units of people that function to help the larger organization accomplish the mission. Now, within the work units, you have employees. Employees, that's why we study human resources, because we're getting down to the employee level when you study human resources. Organizational theory helps you understand the mission of the organization and what an organization is, and work units, and how those units and people relate to each other and behave inside of an organization. But now in human resources, we're focusing on the people and how to get those people to work in a work unit that will then function as a part of the organization to accomplish the organization's mission. Really, what you are after when you have employees is a set of knowledge, skills, and other factors that have been determined as necessary to accomplish the mission. So obviously, the Salvation Army wants people who have an understanding of the clients that they serve and people who are motivated to live a life of poverty or a life of so life of sacrifice in order to accomplish their mission. The Red Cross is organized for people who are able to act under pressure, act within an emergency situation, who are able to engage and who have certain leadership abilities that would allow them to accomplish their mission of providing resources in areas of the natural disaster and stress. Therefore, you are looking for in an employee the KSAOs, the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other qualifying characteristics which would allow the organization, the work unit, to accomplish the mission of the organization. If employers can get those KSAOs in some other way, they will get them in a way other than employees. I'll give you an example. In the private sector, how many of you have used a automated checkout? The automated checkout possesses all the knowledge, skills, and abilities that the clerk used. There are three basic goals of any human resource system. Those three goals are certainly listed on this slide. We're going to talk about each one of them. The first goal of any human resource system doesn't make any difference whether it's public sector, private sector, or nonprofit. The first goal of any human resource system is to try to attract to that organization people with the knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary or required in order to accomplish the mission of the organization. Obviously, what a human resource system wants to do is bring into that organization those people who certainly possess the knowledge, skills, and abilities that will help the organization accomplish the mission. Therefore, if you are DuPont Corporation, you need people who have and you're making chemicals, you need people who have a sound understanding of chemistry, people who have a sound understanding of mechanical engineering and production, people who have an understanding of business management. If you are the city of Durham and you're running a waste disposal site, then you need people who understand the environmental science and the permitting requirements, who understand the chemistry of waste sites, and who also understand issues of management. You are trying to attract those people into your organization. But the other thing that you want to do is, once you attract them, because you don't want to be a revolving door, you want to be able to retain them. You want to be able to keep them within your organization. Because once you have given them experience, once you have trained them, developed their skills, you don't want to then turn around and have to attract others and develop other skills, because other people with skills, because you've now lost and sent your trained minds and hands over to some other organization. So your also goal of a human resource system is try to retain those people that you've attracted. And the other purpose of a human resource system, one of the main purposes, is to develop people. That is, to take people who either possess some skills and enhance those skills so they're greater, or to help people who may not possess those skills but who are competent nonetheless, and try to enhance their skills in such a way that they develop skills that they do not have. you ultimately are trying to put together a workforce that is competent, can do the job, that is productive, that is motivated to do the job. That is, they not only know how to do it, they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to know how to do it, but they also are productive. They have the motivation and the teamwork necessary to produce what needs to be produced and accomplish the mission. And third, you want a diverse workforce. And the reason why you want that diverse workforce is not only because the law requires it to be diverse, but certainly the second goal of a human resource system, again, makes no difference whether it is public, private, or nonprofit. The second goal is to build a working environment, an atmosphere that treats employees, applicants, and former employees in an ethical and equitable manner. Now, let's talk about those three groups. Why do we talk about in here treating employees, applicants, and former employees in an ethical and equitable manner? Well, we talk about those three groups because the law would require us to protect those three groups of people. You need to understand that one of the important roles of the human resource system and the human resource policies is to help the organization comply with federal and state laws. And so these three are mentioned because there are laws which would protect all three of these classes of people: employees, applicants, and former employees. Now, ethical and equitable manner. Well, when we use the term ethical, recognize that it is not synonymous with equitable. Ethical is not even synonymous with legal. There are certain things that are legal that may not be ethical. The example I will use is Walmart. Walmart had talked to the Immigration Service and knew that the Immigration Service was going to come in and arrest several of their employees because they were undocumented workers here in America. Walmart waited until they had worked all day and then let the INS come in, arrest the people, and knew that once they were arrested, Walmart was not going to have to pay them for their wages that they had not paid because they could no longer pay them. It was not legal to pay an undocumented worker, and so Walmart did that. Now, was Walmart unethical? Was Walmart illegal in allowing them to work and then knowing that they were not likely going to get paid? It was probably legal. Was it unethical? Probably was not was less than ethical. I think it was less than ethical for them to do that, even though Walmart probably couldn't have told them to go, because at that point they would have been obstructing justice. Also, it was probably less than ethical for Walmart to hire an undocumented alien and then take advantage of that undocumented alien once they found out they had made the mistake. So legal does not always mean ethical, and ethical does not always mean legal. If it is ethical, it is always. If it is legal, if it is ethical, it is always legal. Or yes, nothing that is illegal can be ethical, but there are things that are legal that may not be ethical. Equitable is also equitable means treating employees fairly. If I give every employee the exact same raise, I have treated them equally, but that doesn't necessarily mean I've treated them fairly. Ethical means fairly, not necessarily equally. Equitable means fairly, not necessarily equally. What equitable means is that you have to take into consideration all the appropriate factors and make a determination that treats people in a fair manner. In a fair manner. We call it human resources now because we are no longer doing the paper processing of personnel. We're expected to do more than that. We're expected to be a business partner. If you look at chapter 1, you start hearing them talk about being a strategic partner in your book. Well, that is the essentially what the third goal of a human resource system starts dealing with, trying to help the organization as a whole stay within its budgetary constraints. What it's trying to basically do is accomplish the first two goals within the budgetary constraints of the public sector or organization, knowing that you obviously have to strike a balance. In order to attract people, you have to have salaries that are competitive, but you may not want to be too competitive because that hurts you in terms of the bottom line, in terms of staying within your budget. You want to retain people, and therefore you have to remain competitive with the market, but you can't be too competitive again because that brings you too far out of whack with the market and hurts your bottom line, your budget constraints. You want to develop people, but you cannot pay for too expensive development programs, or else again it hurts your bottom line. So you're trying to reach a delicate balance there in terms of treating people equitably and ethically. You want to be able to do that, and sometimes that means you have to spend money, but the other flip side of that is if people are dissatisfied, they will leave the organization. You will not be able to retain them, and that costs you more training budget, that costs you more recruitment budget, that costs you less efficiency, and that decreased efficiency translates in the private sector certainly to money, and in the public sector, under some of the new accountability measures, it could indeed cost you money and some efficiency rating, which results in potentially failure to get your boss reelected, or certainly failure to get the budget you need from the General Assembly. So, human resource system is also intended to be a strategic partner, and part of that role is in a strategic partner is to design a system that certainly operates within the budgetary constraints of the employer. Anytime you are seeking to analyze an HR issue, a human resource problem, or a human resource policy, then what you do is you analyze it in terms of these goals, the goals of a human resource system. And therefore, you ask yourself a series of questions. The first of which is, does this action or this issue or this policy attract, retain, or develop a workforce? And does it build a competent workforce, a productive workforce, or a diverse workforce? Does it create an environment that treats employees in an equitable and ethical manner, applicants in an ethical or an equitable manner, former employees in an ethical or equitable manner? And finally, does it consider the financial constraints of the employer? You ask yourself, does it promote those values, those goals, or does it prohibit someone from acting in contravention of those values or goals? So it either must foster some action, promote some action, or prohibit some action which would militate against, work against these goals. Either promote something that would foster the goals, or prohibit something that would militate against or work against these kinds of goals. And that's what you do, and you ask yourself. And so, if, for example, you created a policy which says we will only advertise positions on the 1st and 15th of the month, no matter when they become vacant, then the question you have to ask yourself is, does this help to attract people? Does this help? It obviously doesn't deal with retaining or developing, but the question is, does this help attract people when other employers are out there announcing on the internet every day? Are you, by waiting potentially 14 days, attracting the best people? Does this help you build a competent, productive, and diverse workforce? The likely answer is no. It does not help us attract people because it means that our advertisements will be late, even though it may be the convenience of the HR office. It means your advertisements are going to be late, and it's not going to help you attract people to build a workforce that is competent, productive, and diverse. So it is, so as you analyze it, it doesn't seem to be the kind of policy. What does this policy do? It does. We do promote this policy because of some of the financial constraints. It would be cheaper not to announce every day, and therefore at that point you must now look at the two values, the competing values, and which is more important for you out there, and you can do some bottom line kinds of calculations on some of this, and others you just have to sort of feel it away in your analysis. All right. Now that we have talked about why you have a human resource system, the goals, the products, and how to analyze a human resource problem or issue or policy, now let's talk about the parts of a human resource system. Again, these parts occur no matter what sector you're in, whether they're public sector, private sector, or nonprofit. The first part of a human resource system, and this is a part that if you're in a small organization you will not see, and even in some large organizations you may not see it, but if you're in a good organization, one that is able to adapt to the changing environment, the first part of a human resource system that you will see is the human resource planning function. The human resource planning function has several purposes, but mainly to forecast and design the human resource needs of the organization. When we say forecast, what they have to do is, again, be that strategic partner. Look out and see what the organization needs, and talking to managers and leaders, determine what the organization needs in order to accomplish a changing mission or new challenges out there, threats that may be out there, or in order to take advantage of opportunities that may be over the horizon. It forecasts the needs, the human resource needs. And so it looks at the kinds of KSAOs needed by employees, the number of employees needed in that position, and it then forecasts how begins to plan how you're going to acquire those KSAOs, because you can acquire those KSAOs in various ways, and we will talk about that when we get to another function of the human resource system. Next, a human resource system is also the human resource planning function must design the systems, and basically that means it must structure policy, structure pay, plan how to actually administer that pay. It designs how that organization will compete in the marketplace, and looks at the policies that it will use. Every human resource system is supposed to attract retain, and develop employees, treat them ethically and equitably, and do it within the budgetary constraints of the organization. Well, the design function basically looks at that budgetary constraint, makes a determination about how this organization will compete, comes up with a philosophy on how it will compete, how it is to treat its employees, and then goes on to make that final determination as to pay and other issues. Recognize that every organization has a design philosophy. Even if you're in an organization that does not treat its employees well, then it is determined that I'm going to compete at a certain level in the marketplace. I'm going to compete below the average of the market. I am not going to extend elaborate benefits or elaborate policy benefits to my employees. And they say, and because of that, I'm going to, but because of that, you're not going to attract the best employees. You're going to attract employees that either others have rejected, or employees that are on the route to somewhere else. When you get a good employee, you can count on that employee leaving for a better organization because of the way you have designed your human resource system, both the compensation and the various other policies. The next human resource function is employment and staffing. Within virtually every human resource office, whether large or small, whatever sector, there will be an employment and staffing function. I will quite honestly tell you, generally these are the youngest employees. Why? Because they're the new kids on the block. They bring them in. They want the new kids on the block to come in and learn the employment and staffing. That is one, fresh, new young faces tend to recruit better. They tend to be able to go out in the market and recruit new employees better than an older person. You may, if it's a major corporation, you may be on the road trying to recruit employees. So it is they generally put the new HR people in. And this is why I will often tell you some tips, because the people who first screen applications are not the senior people, and they do not necessarily know human resources as well as others, because those are the really new people. It gets very easy after 2 to 3 years of looking over applications to just sort of get jaded about it, and so people quickly try to move from the staffing and development portion of HR. The internal, there are two ways of basically acquiring the KSAOs that. All right, we're having some technical difficulties, but hopefully I'll be able to get through this slide. As we were saying, your planning function basically already informs you about the KSAOs that you need, how many you need, what kind, where you're going to go get them. Staffing basically says this is how we will acquire plans, how you will acquire the KSAOs that the planning function has identified that you needed. And you can acquire them in two different ways. You can go out and search the labor market, basically trying to acquire them from outside the organization, external staffing, or you can seek to get them internal to the organization, basically either identifying people who have the KSAOs that you need or developing people with the KSAOs that you need. In some organizations, internal staffing is the norm. If you look at a law enforcement area, the police, correctional, and even the military, internal staffing for their leadership is the norm. I'm not sure that I know of any instances in which uh, police departments hire its leadership, with the exception of the chief of police. Most police departments are going to hire their leadership from within. The sergeants, the majors, the captains will be hired within. Someone in the Durham police force has a problem moving to Cary. If they're a sergeant in Durham, they may not be a sergeant in Cary because there are enough people in the Cary force that are working their way up that it would be considered unfair. But also, because police forces and correctional institutions are so unique, it you have to be inside that organization in order to truly understand the culture, and to also know some of the very simple rules of operating within that culture, and therefore internal staffing, hiring from within, is the norm in certain organizations. Hiring from within is not the norm in other organizations. It's not unusual that if, for example, I am replaced as chair, that they go out and hire a chair who could not even spell North Carolina Central. Well, certainly they could spell it, but they may not know where Durham is, because if they are looking for someone to make some significant change, grow the organization, or move the organization in a different direction, then they're not going to do internal staffing. They will tend to bring in somebody who may come in with slightly different ideas, who has seen a variety of other places. That is one of the benefits of moving around an organization and moving around to various other organizations, because you want people to know that you've seen various things, various functions, various organizations, and therefore can bring those experiences to bear. So internal staffing is the norm in some instances. Internal staffing is not the norm in other instances. One of the things that you'll find anytime a place or an organization does specialize in internal staffing, or you emphasizes internal staffing, and that is they also will have a significant development function. Any law enforcement unit has significant development activities, because what they know is their leadership will come from within the organization in all likelihood, and as a result of that, they need to have workshops and various other developmental activities which enhance the skills of those people that are within the organization. And that also activities that help identify the skills of those people within the organization. In law enforcement, for example, the education is not that important. It's not unusual to have police chiefs or fire chiefs that have 2-year degrees, or maybe sometimes no degrees out there. So it's very possible to even have a general that has no degree. It's unusual now because generally they have come through ROTC or OCS or the academy, but it's not unusual, and it's to have a general that has no degree there, because they have done significant amounts of training throughout their development and their progress throughout their careers. Employment, staffing, and employment and staff development can also come external to the organization. External employment and staffing means that you are seeking to look outside the organization to acquire the KSAOs that you've identified that you need. The fact of the matter is that that is probably a very difficult way of acquiring the KSAOs. That means you have to go out and go through a legally supported search for the KSAOs, the skills and employees, one, and it takes time and it takes money to do that. This is the reason why organizations seek to retain the people that they're able to acquire, because not only do the people acquire skills, get better, more efficient, but also it is just very costly to go out and recruit, particularly recruiting top talent. It can be very costly and can be very competitive out there. When we started this discussion on this multimedia lecture, we started out talking about what a human resource system's goals are. One of those goals was to create an environment that was productive, a productive working environment. Human resource systems do that with four subsystems, four parts, functional parts. One, EEO, equal employment opportunity. Some call it affirmative action, some call it equity. No matter what they call it, some call it diversity. No matter what they call it, it is a compliance function at first. And that is, you're trying to comply with all the federal and state equal employment opportunities statutes, trying to comply. That is a major, major cost to large corporations. It is a cost to the government, and it not only costs the government in terms of their in terms of the function, its efficiency, but it is also you take a political hit when you get a number of EEO claims filed against you. It is just not something that any politician wants to have there filed against their administration. The other part of EEO, affirmative action, is not compliance. It is a way of trying to bring diversity into the organization, looking at at policies, practices that try to bring diversity, diverse people into the organization. I think I said earlier that diverse groups tend to tackle complex problems better than homogeneous groups. Corporations have learned that now. In fact, the biggest supporters of the affirmative action policy for the University of Michigan in the lawsuit that attacked affirmative action, the biggest supporters, the amicus curiae brief, was filed by the Chamber of Commerce and the business sector, because what they were saying is we have to have a diverse workforce. It not only is good for the sale of our products, it is good to understand how various communities think and to tackle many of the complex problems that we have. And so you will find that that the EEO is more than a compliance mode. It is also a way of becoming a strategic partner, for HR to become a strategic partner. The other system that helps to produce a productive work environment is performance management. Performance management is the work evaluation system. Basically, it's in the ideal world in performance management, an employee is informed early on what is expected of them, the performance norms. And those need to be as specific as possible, but you try not to be too specific because the work changes on a regular basis, and if you get too specific, then you get hung up on that specificity. As an employee, you want the specificity. As a manager, you don't want as much of that specificity. The performance management system informs the employee of what is expected of them, and then that performance management system then later comes back and encourages discussions between managers and employees as to how well they are doing, how they can enhance their performance. Now, again, let's talk about the difference in the public sector and the private sector. The measure of success in the public sector, nonprofit sector, governmental sector, the measure of success is a little different. In the public sector, in the private sector, the measure of success is increasing your client base, which increases your profit, and therefore you want an employee with the KSAOs that can do those things, considering the cost. Basically, what you always have to do, remember, one of the last parts of what a human resource system does is it operates within the budgetary constraints. And so what you have to say is, I need these KSAOs. I need these KSAOs so that I can increase client base and increase profits, but I've got to consider the cost of acquiring those KSAOs. But the measure of success is, am I getting the type of employees that can increase the client base and increase profit, given the cost of getting them out there. In the nonprofit sector, the desire is to increase the client base, serve the people, but also increase donations. Increase the client base, and serve the people, but increase donations. They want employees that have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to increase the client base, serve the people, and help them gather donations. But they also want employees that are philosophically aligned with the mission or the organization, considering the cost. And when I say philosophically aligned, I mean you must be in agreement with what this nonprofit organization is doing. You cannot expect to have a person who is philosophically opposed to this organization's philosophy, working in the organization. So you would not expect a pro-choice executive director of a Catholic charity, because they are not. Okay, now let's get to the fun part. Let's talk about the differences in the public sector and private sector. And when I say public sector and private sector, I really mean public sector, nonprofit sector, and governmental sector, because these are, in the personnel area, distinct sectors, and the philosophy and approach is quite different. In the private sector, the measure of success is basically the type of employee that they want is a diverse employee with the KSAOs, so that they can expand their customer base and can generate a profit. That's the measure of success. That's a measure of a successful hire. Hiring a group of diverse employees that have the KSAOs they are now able to expand customer base and expand their profit. In the nonprofit sector, what they're looking for is employees that possess the KSAOs, but also employees that are philosophically aligned with the organization. That allows them to, again, expand their customer base, serve those customers, and obtain donations. Now let me go back and talk about what that philosophically aligned means. In the nonprofit sector, let's take the Catholic Church, for example. One of the things I often say is the Pope will never be my pastor, and Billy Graham will never be the Pope, because as the hiring authority in the Catholic Church, you are going to hire a pope that is philosophically aligned with the Catholic Church, with Catholic doctrine. If you are going to hire somebody to be the head of Baptist Hospital, a non-profit organization, you are going to have someone who is philosophically aligned with Baptists and if there's some particular doctrine that Baptists have in terms of medical procedures, then they're going to be aligned in that way. So you are going to make sure that there is no inconsistency between the employee and the philosophical bent of the organization. You're looking for those KSAOs, but you're also looking for that philosophical alignment. You would not expect to hire someone, a pro-choice NARAL type executive director as a part of the Catholic children's charities. That's just not going to happen, because you're talking about someone who is philosophically out of tune, out of step with the Catholic children's charities that are clearly not pro-choice, clearly pro-life in everything that they do. To hire a pro-choice executive director of the Catholic Children's Charity means you're going to shrink your donor base. You're going to cause people to not trust the services that you give, and certainly your donations will go down. That would not be a successful nonprofit. In the government sector, what we're looking for is a set of diverse employees. I didn't use the word diverse in the nonprofit sector because while we are after racial diversity, maybe even gender diversity, you may not be. It's very possible that, I wouldn't think that now the National Organization of Women would hire me as the executive director. I'd probably have a very difficult time getting there. It's possible that they would hire a male, but it's not likely that that's going to happen. And so diversity to the extent that it does not hinder the philosophical alignment, nonprofits would be able to deal with. But if diversity meant going against their philosophical bent of the organization, then diversity is not going to be an aim. And that's the reason why you see me leaving the word diverse off the nonprofit. In the government, you want diverse. And the reason you want diverse is, one, you want diverse people with political connections and the KSAOs, which means that you want your workforce to reflect the population of your jurisdiction. You want them to have some political muscle, some ability to bring about some political contributions and make and influence people, and you want them to also have the KSAOs, the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other qualifying characteristics that are necessary to accomplish the mission of the governmental agency. But recognize that what most politicians want is someone who can bring them voters, who can bring them political contributions, and then who can also increase their client base. In essence, the politician wants someone who can address the needs of the administration from a political standpoint as well as an administrative standpoint, and those two shouldn't be mixed.